In this video, I'm going to talk about how we can avoid shape distortion when we're dimensioning our 2D sketches in Autodesk Inventor Professional. So here I have just a sketch open in front of me. I have just a shape drawn that has a bunch of 90-degree corners and a bunch of different lengths. It kind of looks like an E actually. So shape distortion. First, let's talk about what I'm actually talking about. Shape distortion is when your sketch sort of twists or flips on you when you're placing dimensions, and it basically changes shape. So I'm going to try to make that happen here. So I'm going to place a dimension, and I'm just going to dimension the inside height here. Oh, and let's go with something like 2. So I'm going to change that to 2. Now, this first dimension I placed, I saw that my entire sketch updated, and it lengthened this line to be 2 inches, and everything else sort of grew around it. Okay, all good, no distortion. Moving on, I'm going to dimension from this line here, and let's go to this line here. And let's make that something like 3. All right, distortion is in the house here. So what happened is we can see the middle of my E here has twisted, and it sort of flipped, so the rectangle is above this line rather than below it. So this is distortion when we talk about it. It's when your sketch actually changes the shape when you're placing dimensions on here. Now there's a couple of ways to deal with this. One is I'm hitting escape on my keyboard to close my dimension button, and I can actually click and drag these lines. Because my sketch is purple, it is not fully constrained. I should actually be able to click and drag, let's say this point here, so I can click and drag this point down to sort of sort my sketch out again, and then I'm good to keep placing dimensions on here. Now, another way to avoid shape distortion is to always place your dimensions from biggest to smallest. You'll notice here I started with a small dimension and I worked my way up to a big one, and what happened was there was nothing holding this shape. Even if I don't know what this size is yet, placing dimensions on here and just saying, yep, sure, I'm good with that one, and yep, sure, I'm good with this one. Placing dimensions on here to start with, maybe not a driven one, will hold this shape because it can't distort if you've already said, no, this guy has to be this big, and there's no way for him to twist around once you do that. So dimensioning from biggest to smallest is the best way to avoid that distortion, because now if I dimensioned again and I went, let's say, from the top line to, oops, let's try that again. So I go from my top line to this line right here, and let's say this was only supposed to be 4. Okay, so far so good, but this guy could have twisted over top of himself as well. So distortion happens when your geometry basically doesn't have enough geometric sketches or geometric constraints on it, or it doesn't have enough dimensions on it. So it sort of just twists on you, and you might get something like that happening. You might even get something like this happening if you're really unlucky, where your whole sketch has actually just changed shape on you, and that's what we call distortion. So I'm just going to sort this guy back out here, and let's try this again. So instead of placing my smallest dimensions, I'm always going to start with my biggest ones. Now, what is a big dimension? In case you're brand new to dimensioning here, it's the biggest ones I could possibly get on my shape. So in this case, it would be from the overall top, the highest point on my sketch, to the overall bottom, so the bottommost point on my sketch. And let's say that one's only supposed to be 6. Now the next biggest dimension would be the overall width of my shape. So I'm going to dimension from the farthest point on the right to the farthest point on the left. And let's say that's also 6. Okay, no distortion so far. Now I'm going to work my way in. So I'm going to start here with, let's start with this height right here. So I'm going to dimension this guy right here, and I'm going to say he should just be 1. All right, now I'm going to change this one at the top here, and what I'm doing as I'm placing these dimensions is I'm trying to pick ones that are not going to interfere or cause distortion. So I can see right here, okay, if I change this height here, what's going to happen? Well, all that's going to happen is this line is going to get smaller. Nothing in here is going to get in the way. Whereas in my head, what I'm thinking is, okay, what if I dimension from this top line to here? Well, what are some possibilities? Well, one of the big possibilities is it grabs this line and drags it back here, and we get that distortion again. So as I'm placing my dimensions, I'm mentally thinking, okay, I've placed my biggest, and I'm working my way down to the smaller ones now. How do I get this so that it's not going to distort? So I'm going to place this one. It's also going to be 2. And then I'm going to place this middle guy here. It's going to be 1. And let's just place this one at 1 as well. Okay, so here I can see I've done all my steps vertically. I would do all the horizontal ones using the same sort of system. So I am trying to place my dimensions so that when it grabs my line and changes it, so such as when I dimension from here to here, the only thing that it's going to change is where this line's located. It can't actually affect any of my other lines to cause that distortion. So shape distortion is something that is fairly easily dealt with. You can, once you have it, you can just grab it and drag your line. So for example, if this guy had popped out here, I could just grab his line, drag him back, not the constraint, grab the line, drag it back to get my shape back and keep on dimensioning. So you can deal with shape distortion that way, or you can try to avoid it right from the beginning by just dimensioning your biggest dimensions first, and then sometimes placing even placeholder dimensions on your sketches, such as this one, so that he doesn't change in size as I'm dimensioning everything else.